Ever wondered how crucial a support system can be during life's toughest moments? Or how someone can navigate kidney cancer smack in the middle of a pandemic? Hi, and welcome to Kidney Cancer Unfiltered, the podcast by the Kidney Cancer Association, diving deep into the raw stories of kidney cancer patients and survivors. I'm Anna Maria Scaccia, your guide through the real, unfiltered experiences that often go untold. Our guest, Tracy Poyneer, not only tackled the reality of a rare cancer, but did so while the whole world grappled with the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic. In this episode, Tracy shares the challenges of treating cancer during a lockdown and the lasting effects we don't talk enough about. Tracy also gets real about life after surgery, delving into how intimacy changes and why communication is the glue for rebuilding connections. And beyond her own journey, she's been a champion for breaking down barriers and building bridges in the cancer community. Maybe, just maybe, by sharing these experiences, we'll find new ways to make mental health care more accessible for those impacted by cancer, no matter their stage, no matter their type, no matter their diagnosis. Stick around for a conversation that's not just about one person, but invites us all into the collective cancer experience. Tracy, I know we've known each other for the last 3 years and we're pretty close, but I would love it so thank you for coming on the
You're
show
welcome.
and talking to me about the collective cancer experience. But I would love it if you could introduce yourself to the lovely listeners.
I'm Tracy Poyneer, and I am 50 years old. I was diagnosed back in February 2020 when I developed COVID pneumonia. And so I was sent to the ER. When they ran my labs, they saw that my D-dimer was high, really elevated. And at that time, during COVID pneumonia, they were noticing that a majority of folks who were coming in with similar symptoms as myself, their D-dimer was high, but our local ER decided to take a chance and go ahead and send me in for CT to rule out embolism. And so I was sent in for CT, and when I was in there, I instantly knew something was a little more serious than COVID pneumonia, which seems odd because that was a very serious diagnosis, on its own. So as you can imagine, back in December 2020, I was completely alone. My husband was not allowed to go with me. He couldn't ride in the to the ER with me. He couldn't see me. There were absolutely no visitors. So I was confused because they kept saying something about the left side. And I was like, oh no, my left side. And what it actually ended up revealing was at the time, 7.5 centimeter tumor on my left kidney. So fast forward today, I was diagnosed officially after my full nephrectomy I apologize. I forgot to mention this. So I'm leaving out parts of the story. At that time, they already thought I was metastatic because I had lesions appear on my scan, on my lungs. I don't know that they necessarily related ground glass nodules at that time with COVID. I don't think that was a common thing they saw, but I could be wrong. But that's in the impression that I got. So how I was told that I had a tumor was much later in the week after I had gone through my treatments for COVID pneumonia. A doctor came in and said, "Did anyone tell you about the tumor on your left kidney?" And I was like, "No, nobody told me." So we walked over to the chalkboard or the board and wrote down the name of an oncologist that was and a nephrologist that was coming to see me, a surgeon, later on in the week. So that's kind of what kickstarted my story.
We were all diagnosed during COVID. And we all kind of have similar experiences, and other people that we might have touched base with that we know.
Right.
have similar experiences of not being able to have a partner with them or having to go
Yes.
through it alone. And so I kind of want to kick off there,
Sure.
because, because cancer can be lonely no matter COVID or not. But I think there is like a, a special traumatic part of the
Oh,
cancer experiences
yes.
when you're going through a pandemic, no matter what like
Correct.
stage you're at. So I love, in talking about the collective experience, I'd love to start there for you. How,
Sure.
it's going to be a simple question, but there's so much to unpack. How did it
Sure.
feel to you, like being diagnosed in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, I was worried I wasn't going to make it through COVID. So when I heard that there was a large tumor on my kidney, I was completely floored and devastated. I thought it was a death sentence right away,
Yeah.
immediately. And what was interesting is that I had no one to comfort me. And how do I call my husband and say, oh my gosh, someone told me I have a tumor and he's not there? That would be a phone call or a text. So I was really confused and I didn't understand. But um, a nurse came in and I was crying and she told me that her husband had gone through kidney cancer and he was a doctor, and that she said, honey, you will be able to live with one kidney. Don't worry about it. You'll just lose your kidney and that'll be all. What I didn't anticipate is being diagnosed with a rare subtype. And even though we have a rare subtype, I was a little taken aback by it being dismissed as I'll just lose
Yes.
my kidney. Because it doesn't
Yes.
matter what subtype, it doesn't matter what stage. That is devastating news, period.
Yes. And so for the listeners who may be listening to this the first time and not have listened to the other episodes, the subtype that Tracy is talking about is chromophobe renal cell carcinoma. We had both had that subtype. But
Right.
yeah, it still gets dismissed, right? I remember
Correct.
of so many, I can't say so many, but a few people say to me, it's like, well, at least you have two kidneys. And it's like, I am,
No.
at that time I was 37. I'm like, I don't want to have to live the rest of my life worrying about whether or not that kidney is going to crap out of me and I'm going to have to go on dialysis earlier
Yes.
than I ever would, or go on dialysis and I would never had it otherwise, right? Like it's
Correct. And at the time, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
no,
you.
this is a conversation.
And what we didn't know at the time when we were diagnosed is there was very little information about our rare
Yes.
subtype. So there, we couldn't just Google what's your life expectancy, what's the reoccurrence rate. That data really wasn't available for us. So even being diagnosed at a earlier stage or even a later stage, I think we all felt the same, that we were
Yes.
so scared and confused.
Yeah, and I think we still are, right? Like no matter your
Yes,
stage, no matter
absolutely.
your cancer, like there is that anxiety that comes with scans. There's anxiety that comes with the
Correct.
rest of your life. And it's frustrating when we're told that we need to be grateful. And if we are to list all the reasons why we have this worry, it still
Yes.
ends up getting dismissed. So and it's honestly true of many rare subtypes of kidney cancer. Our treatment before stage 4 is really just surgery. It's
Correct.
not, my doctor wasn't willing to give me any type of preventative, treatment afterwards because it wasn't really available to me. There isn't a good enough effectiveness rate. That is not the word, but
Well,
it's
I
not
was going to
effective
mention that
enough.
there are a lot of drugs on the market now that are available to those that were diagnosed, even at stage 3 and 4. I'm sorry, 2 and 3, that are offered immunotherapies, and we weren't, because a lot of
Yes.
the drugs 3 years ago were not available even today. Like they just weren't available to us. They weren't. It wasn't an option.
Yeah, exactly. Which again goes back to the anxiety. So let's get
Right.
into the anxiety of it, like that
Sure.
collective experience. And I talked about this to you behind the scenes, but just for the listeners, the reason why I
Yes.
really want to talk about the collective cancer experience is that we tend to be siloed a lot. And I think sometimes survivors tend to internalize that themselves too, and silo themselves when really we all have a very similar experience. Despite our cancer, despite our stage, we all have to worry about what our scans are going to say. We all worry about whether or not our cancer is going to come back. We all worry about whether or not we're going
Yes.
to get a second primary. And, you know, only 5% of cancer survivors, research shows, get help for cancer-related anxiety, depression, and loneliness. So the majority of us are all going about this on our own. And so it's just really important for
Yeah.
us to, as survivors, to kind of connect at that base human level of, well, we've went through a very traumatic experience. Cancer is traumatic no matter the type of cancer you have. And we need to
And I
really
want to
connect
say
on
that
that.
I want to reiterate that so everybody can hear, but I see that in patient support, in support groups, and you are right. It does not matter the stage or the subtype. It's trauma. It's so
Yeah.
traumatic when you get a diagnosis, regardless of the stage.
Yeah, because like the thing with cancer, and it's with a lot of diseases, right? You don't know what's
Mhm.
happening in your body. Like
Correct.
it's, you know, and with our cancer, I mean, kidney cancer in general, but you know, with our cancer, we wouldn't have symptoms until advanced stages, right? I think the
And
only
that's a
reason,
good point. Mhm.
I was going to say, the only reason
Yeah.
why I felt that I had that pain in my lower back, which went away after surgery, I think was because of the location of the tumor and how it pressed
Oh,
against my back, right? Otherwise, I probably would have never, and like the way it pressed, I guess, against my intestines or however it may have been positioned. But that's the only reason why, that and maybe lack of appetite, that I could attribute to something else. But like the blood in the urine, the extra protein,
correct. Yeah.
like I was looking at my labs prior to surgery and prior to diagnosis, the creatinine wasn't as high, if you will, as it is now. Like, yeah, I will
Oh,
shut up and
wow.
let you speak now.
So in my experience, and I believe we've discussed this before previously, my symptoms were brushed off. They weren't brushed off or set aside. I don't want to say that totally. I think that it was more so that I kept going to a gynecologist because I was concerned about blood, you know, and every time I was getting reoccurrent UTIs and it would automatically blow up into a kidney infection. And so I had a lot of bleeding from fibroids. I have a genetic mutation called SDHB. And so that typically goes hand in hand with fibroids. And I don't know the statistics. You'll be able to talk about that, whether or not that's true with our subtype of cancer. If you see a lot of patients in support with female patients in support with uterine fibroids, I know I suffered for many years with them. So we thought that was the issue. And so I had a lot of procedures relating to an endometrial ablation. And my gynecologist couldn't figure out why they weren't really finding anything when all along it was probably.
I have polycystic ovary syndrome.
Okay.
And you know, so and mostly the cyst are mostly on my left ovary. And so that's usually like, especially during period ovulation, where I would feel pain. So
Right.
I had this persistent pain for a while. And I
Okay.
went to my gyno. I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure, you know, I'm feeling this pain. It's my ovary. She's like,
Yeah.
it's not your ovary. That's way too high. And
Same.
so I'm like, okay, then maybe it has to be something else. And then fast forward to to July and August, and like the ball
You're
started
telling my
rolling.
story. It's very similar. I was having pain and I was always attributing back to like female, but what was confusing is that it was back pain. It was in the back, the flank area, but
Yes.
I thought it was related to my female issues.
Yeah.
So very similar
And that's
experience for me.
unfortunately, yeah. Sorry to cut you off. That's the thing. We get into a flow, and I just like want to
I know I
interrupt and
forget
talk.
sometimes.
But I was gonna say, like, I think that, and this is a collective for half of the population, right? But like, when it
Oh,
comes to
that's true.
being, you know, become
Yes.
to being a person who identifies as a woman in healthcare, it's very
Yes.
easy for us to dismiss our symptoms because we are more often than not dismissed in the first place. And so
Right.
I think in terms of survivorship, right? Survivorship the day you become diagnosed, you know,
Yes.
I think there is a magnified worry about what is going to happen now that you've been treated, because
Right.
are my symptoms going to be missed again? Or is if my cancer comes back, is it going to be missed again? Am I going to be dismissed because I'm a woman, or because I'm overweight, or because of this, or because of that? Is it going to
That's a
be
great
that,
point.
they catch it at stage 4? And it goes back to the
Yeah.
anxiety and whatnot. But it's just something that we have to consider, no matter the stage, no matter the type of cancer. There are all these other levels and layers.
Correct. And no matter what gender you are as well. So
Yes.
I think we also have men that have been diagnosed. And so like I think for me, just navigating through this journey, what has kept me focused is that I'm grateful that I came down with COVID pneumonia, because if I would have never had gotten diagnosed with COVID, I probably would have never even found my cancer as early as it was found, even though it was at a later stage. So I am grateful in a weird way for that.
Yeah. No, that
Is
makes
it
sense.
you
Yep.
have to find joy in small things. And that's kind of how I've navigated through my journey to keep myself sane.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's weird at all, because
Yeah. Okay.
again, it's one of those diseases, right? Or conditions,
Yes.
or whatever you want to call it, where, if you have symptoms, it's probably too late. So if like you get that
Yeah.
kind of luck, if you will, quote unquote luck, as it's put
Right.
towards us, right? You can't help. Like, I'm grateful for, my PCP, for her due diligence, right? Otherwise,
Yes.
I would have
Absolutely.
never, and going back, you had made, you had reacted to what I said. So my creatinine is higher now because I'm more muscular than I was when I was
Okay.
diagnosed. And, muscularity does impact your creatinine levels, which is why there are a lot of researchers who are saying the creatinine formula for kidney function is actually not a very accurate formula. And I could go off about that. I won't.
That's podcast number
Yeah,
2.
that's like number 6,000.
Number
Um,
6,000.
yeah, but like, looking at my levels, I could definitely see the difference prior to my diagnosis and
You
after.
could.
Like,
Yes.
like, creatinine's the only thing now that is a little bit higher. Everything else is normal range and perfect, and I look beautiful and it's great. But if I
You
didn't
do.
have,
You
thank
definitely
you,
do.
so do you. But I'm,
Thank you.
so do you. But if I didn't have my PCP do her due diligence, if I wasn't so into
Yeah.
fitness, we probably would have
Right.
not have caught it, like, at all.
And that's interesting. Yeah, I'm so grateful for your journey and how that played out for you, because if that was missed, right? Think about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, it goes back to that, like, collective, like, and we can't do the what if things, like, as
We
survivors.
can't, we should
It
not, and I should
Yeah.
take that back. But I
No,
think
don't
in your
take it
mind,
back.
it's a learning experience for me, because I think I replay things in my head like, gosh, what if I did this? What if I did that? And something that Joel Stern, who is a board member on KCA's board, told me was that you should give your mind a break. Only allow yourself to and this is really hard. You have to work really hard to get to this point. Only
Yes.
allow yourself to think about things like that, a certain amount of time during the day. And I've been trying his technique as much as possible. And I think that was really good advice. And that's not going to work for everybody. My journey, oh gosh, it's hard for me to keep up with my own journey. Like, so I am like giving advice, but I think that everybody's journey is a little different. What that looks like and how they navigate through.
I think it's, even though everybody's journey is different, I think some advice is
Mhm.
universal, right? And like you
Okay,
said,
good. Yeah.
it's something that you work towards. And it's something I talk to, like, people about too, is that, it's not, the progress is not measured by whether or not you stopped having these conversations with yourself, or you stopped being self-deprecating, or you stop going into these spirals. Because sometimes if you stop, it's not because you got over anything or you were able to heal. It's because you've compartmentalized and you just don't think about it anymore, right? Like, you just
Yes.
shove it down.
Yes.
The progress is measured more by how quickly you now talk yourself back, how quickly you
Right.
now recognize how to separate your logic from your emotion, how how much you are engaging in dialectical thinking and accepting that versus like making yourself feel guilty for having any other emotions other than this X emotion, right? Like it's not necessary
Right.
because we're human. We are
We
human. We're going
are.
to have these emotions. We can be grateful. I say it all, I keep saying it over and over because to be grateful and worried, and that's okay.
Yes,
But it's just,
it's okay to feel grief. It's okay to go through that shock and those emotions. Absolutely.
yeah. So speaking of emotions, the other part of like the collective experience is managing not only your own, but the ones of your loved ones and the people taking
Right.
care of you. And I just wanted to get kind of into your experience. What was it like to have to be able, or rather not to have to be able, but rather having to kind of manage how other people reacted to your cancer and how you were dealing with it and your treatment and all that.
Wow, that's a really big question, because I have a really big family, and I know a lot of people that will be watching this have no idea, and I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I am married. My husband is absolutely amazing, and I have a great support system through him. But we have 6 children and we have 5 grandchildren, and we have his side of the family on the West Coast, and then my side of the family here on the East Coast. So when you say how did we manage that with family, that's hard because right, we have such a big
Yeah.
family, and then age appropriate. All of our children are adult children, over the age of 18. So I'm a very blunt person.
Yeah.
I'm very open with my journey. I made that decision from the beginning because I knew immediately that I didn't want anybody else to have to go through what I went through, and not understand where to go or what the future looked like. So I told my children immediately, and because they were adults, they were able to process their own emotions. I let them process their own emotions and supported them in any way I could, because that's the type of parent I am. And then I left it up to them and respected them in the delivery of how they wanted to tell their children, especially with the fact that I had genetic testing. So that was another level, which
Mm.
was a little hard. Of course, my mom and dad have been very supportive, and they're strong people. So yeah, and it was weird because it was during the pandemic, so I couldn't physically, like, hug anybody. I
Yeah.
couldn't This was all done via either Zoom or a text message. So I mean, and again, I'm speaking about my journey, and it may not look like anybody else's, and you are very aware, it was so hard and confusing. Everybody was afraid of dying from COVID. So then when you're like, "Oh, I've got cancer," it was like a double whammy. It was very weird, a weird
Yeah.
time. And I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I had a strong family to be able to cope with me.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I really just had my partner, Sam, and my son
Right.
here. So I could like everything telling anyone else, it was all like via phone, all via
It
that. Like
was.
no one was able to come. Like it took me about 2 years before I was able to go back home and actually see my family.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so sorry.
it's
That was such a hard time for all of us. I know it
yes.
was. And I
Yeah.
can validate that. And you were such a strong support system to me. And when I learned difficult news and I was scared of dying, I went to you and to
Yeah.
several other ladies when I thought it was too hard information to share right then with my partner or with my mom or dad or even my brother, because
Yeah.
sometimes when we get information, we don't have the full picture. We may get
Yes.
a scan report that's, a radiology report, and we'll refresh the my chart and read it. And what we are reading sounds really bad, especially if you Google it. So then your natural reaction is to go to your partner and say, oh my gosh, I think this is happening, right? And then you
Mhm.
have to wait to speak to your oncologist, and that looks very different for people. Sometimes I'm with a big center. I'm with Georgetown Lombardi Cancer Center and NIH. So I get results and meet with my doctor within 1 hour. But it doesn't look like that for everybody. Some people have to wait a week or two before they can even go in and speak with their oncologist.
Yeah. I'm one of those people. I
Oh,
don't get my
I don't.
result. And every time like you and the ladies talk about getting
Oh my
results right
gosh.
away, I'm like, why? Why am I the only one? But I think like you're right. Like we sit there
It's
and
all
we
different for everybody.
yeah. And it's like there's no one standard of care. There's no one
There's
standard
not.
practice. But having
No.
those people that you can turn to, I think, is something important
Yes.
across the spectrum of cancer and
Correct.
cancer survivorship. Is that, and sometimes it doesn't need to be like a Facebook support group, although those are very like excellent places for support for people. But sometimes it's just having like your close, little group of survivor friends
Correct.
who could like talk
Yes.
you down and be like, okay, let's think of other things. Let's take a breath for a second. Let's like
So,
think of other questions that you have to ask your
yeah.
doctor and stuff.
So I'm not sure if the listeners know our full story. I don't, I'm not sure if they do, if you've talked about it in your previous podcast, but we have a group of, including myself, of 6 women who are very close. And so they are the first ones that know about my diagnosis before my partner, before my husband, before my family. And they are my trusted people, my people that I go to for comfort and support and even advice,
Yeah.
because they are other cancer survivors and warriors. And to me, that is invaluable because that you guys get me like nobody else, nobody else.
Yeah, no, 100%. I've talked a little bit about it, but
Okay, good.
so, and thank you for, saying that. Cause sometimes even though I say, hey, we have to
Yeah.
explain stuff, I get into the habit
Okay.
of, oh, everyone knows what's going on in my brain. But
It
yeah,
feels like I'm talking to family right now. So
yeah.
I
And we haven't
apologize
met
if
in person. No, and we haven't met in
never.
person yet. I think that was the benefit of having
Yeah.
cancer. It sounds weird to call it a benefit, but that was kind of the benefit
Right.
of having
Yeah.
cancer during COVID, is that we were forced to make connections
Yes.
online and forced to find
Yes.
people online. And we were able to like strengthen that relationship over the years, even though we've never met in person. But I wanted to talk about other things that is collective. I think one
Sure.
thing that we talked about is also intimacy and relationships. And I know that's a
Yes.
subject that you've wanted to talk about too, because it doesn't get talked
I
a lot
do.
about enough. There is an episode, if you guys haven't listened to it yet, we do have an episode on intimacy and relationships, so go check that out. But more broadly,
Yeah.
it is an experience across cancers, across stages, across treatment, that just being able to connect with your partner. I know for myself, and if he listens to this, it might be the first time he hears it, so I'm sorry, Sam. But like, I know when I
Same with
was,
Adam. He's going to
yeah,
hear it for the
it's
first
like,
time too.
the public is going to hear before you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Grumpy.
Yeah. But
My children are blushing.
yeah, you know what? That's okay, right? Like
Yeah, it's
we
okay. We
have
got to talk about
lives.
it. It's okay to
Yeah.
talk about it.
But
There's a TLC song. There's a TLC song that talks about it. So it's okay to talk about things.
exactly. But I know when I was like recovering and like towards my end of like the first part of recovery, right? Where like your
Right.
stitches are still healing and like you
Yes.
can't move that much.
Yes.
Where I know I felt incredibly ugly, and like he
Mm.
didn't really touch me, and like it was something I was craving and I didn't know how to ask him for that. And I think it's something we did have a blowout about at
Yeah.
some point,
And
but
that's normal.
it's completely normal.
That's
But I
totally
feel like,
normal.
when we
Yeah.
talk about intimacy, it's always in like the context of like prolonged treatment, but it's
Right.
something that is still effective, even if, it's just a surgery you had and you're recovering,
Correct.
so I would love to, what about you?
Sure. I would love to talk about it. Something I wanted to talk about for a while because I have not seen or heard anybody else talk about intimacy issues. And let's face it, both you and I are pretty young. We are pretty young for being diagnosed with kidney cancer. And so Yeah, what you don't expect, especially as a mom, I had like incontinence issues. I had incontinence issues after I had 4 children. My last set were twins. So it wasn't to the degree and the level after my multiple surgeries. So I didn't just have a full nephrectomy. After my full nephrectomy, I developed incisional hernias. And
Mm,
so then I had to have 2 of those repaired. And then I went on to a hysterectomy. So during that time, yes, there were a lot of times when poor Adam, I'm sure he felt like, I mean, your energy is just so low, right? Your energy is low, you're exhausted, even when you're given the green light to be intimate again. Sometimes you just aren't ready for various reasons. You feel ugly. I gained so much weight because I was down for so long after surgery after surgery. And so I felt disgusting and ugly. It wasn't anything against him, but we were at times feeling like, gosh, the spark in our marriage, what happened? And it wasn't
yeah.
a lack of love. It was just like we were used to being this healthy young couple who were very intimate. And now we find ourselves in this weird place. And then what I never expected is to have incontinence issues way worse than I did after I had my children. So navigating through that, the way Adam and I have gotten through this is communication.
Yeah.
I mean, it just took it, and it's embarrassing, right? Sometimes it's embarrassing to talk about those things, but if you don't, it only makes it worse.
Yeah. 100%. And
And I
I,
can't speak for everybody's relationship. This is my journey and your journey, but I have a wonderfully supportive partner. So I'm very grateful for that. But that's how we were able to overcome that, is just to be completely open and honest and to talk about it
yeah.
out loud.
I think communication is key no matter what your journey is, though. And I think that is one
Yeah,
thing when I look back, not to do the what if or regret, because I try not to have regrets, right? I made
right.
decisions and you make them and you go. But I would say that's one thing I regret about my first cancer treatment is not being as communicative. But I also think, and this is similar for a lot of cancer survivors I've spoken to, if you don't even know how to process what you're experiencing, you can't process it with your partner. Like you can't process it with the
Correct.
people you love. Like for me, I didn't
Right.
have incontinence. I, as gross it is, I did have bowel issues, right? And
So I didn't mention that part, but I had bowel issues as well. I had the
yeah,
same. Yeah.
yeah. And I was actually the other night, I was messing around with Kelly because I was
I
telling, well, I was telling I had a
sorry.
C-section.
I'm
No,
sorry.
I was, because the thing is, I had a
Identifying with
C-section.
you right now so
What?
much, and it feels like, look at how we're laughing about this, and it
Yeah.
feels good to identify with somebody because I never talk about this with anyone, and it feels good somebody is going through this. And I know I would hate for anybody to go through it, but the fact that somebody else is, it's like a relief that I'm not alone, because
Yes.
you have bowel problems in ways you can't imagine. And so
Yes.
when I'm in my 40s and your husband has to help you with an enema, that's very personal, very different than
Yeah.
sex,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I was saying, like,
Mhm.
I was messing with Kelly because I had a C-section and I was like, I could not, I'm going to be gross, but it's like, I could not poop straight since I had you because they had to put it back in. And then when I had the nephrectomy, like, yes, it was robotic, but they still did something there that, like,
They do. It does.
it does something where it's like I've clogged a
I
bloody
love
a
that you said that.
toilet because
My one
after
of
my nephrectomy.
my scan after my nephrectomy, and I'm not a doctor by any means, so forgive me, but it described in detail how my intestines had moved
Oh
and
wow.
settled. after
Yeah.
I had my tumor and kidney removed. So
Yes.
that's so hilarious.
Yeah, no, like the first one, the first scan, like the year scan after the surgery, my doctor's
Yeah.
like, yeah, your spleen and intestines are just making like they found a place for rent, like for rent, and they're just making their way in there. And it's like, no
Yeah.
wonder I have like certain feelings on that side because things are shifting. But you're right, we don't like,
Yeah.
especially as women, like we don't talk very bluntly about
No.
those things. It's mostly like, oh yeah, the side effects, I feel tired. It's like, no, it's not just feeling tired, it's not feeling sore. It's also like,
Yes.
well, what is the rest of my life looking like? Oh, bowel
Yeah.
problems for the rest of my life, like having to be
Yeah.
careful, like when or urinary issues. I've had like 3
Same.
UTIs since I hadn't had UTIs before, but after I had my left kidney removed, all of a sudden now like I
Yes.
have more UTIs. I'm more prone to
Same.
them. And it's just, those are
Yeah.
things that we have to deal with that we don't talk about, right? Like it's just,
Right.
it's not something that is often discussed.
That is true. Very, very true. So I feel better. I feel better
Good.
just talking about it openly today. So thank
Good.
you.
I mean, and that's what we want, right? Like we want people to
Yeah.
listen to this no matter where they are in their cancer journey to be like, oh, I am not the only one who feels this way. Because sometimes you can turn to people you don't know and say, hey, this is an
Yes.
experience I'm having. And the only people who like might comment on that post are people who have not had that experience. So you feel even more so alone. And it's like, I want to make sure people listening to this are like, okay, I couldn't find I couldn't find help or relate to people here, but now I found 2 people who maybe I could reach out to talk more about
Exactly.
this.
And they will realize that it's totally normal to go through
Yeah.
those things, that you're not alone.
Yeah, and
Because
I
it
think
feels very lonely sometimes. I don't wanna call up my mom and talk about my intimacy, my almost 80-year-old mom, and talk about my intimacy issues, even though I'm very close to her, because
yeah,
that's just awkward and weird. So then I wouldn't go to my friends and talk about that, at my
yeah,
age, because they're not experiencing it, and it's kind of it's an embarrassing thing. So, but you know what? I'm glad we're breaking that stigma, and it's okay to
yeah.
talk about hard things. Yeah.
Yeah, we all have our people that we can talk to, right? Like we can talk to
Yes.
survivors about things that we can't talk to our partners and friends about because they have an insight into that experience, right? I want us
Right.
to stop being so siloed about it, right? I want us to
I
stop,
agree.
worrying about, well, we have to go here, we have to go to these people, especially when we might have multiple cancer experiences, right? Speaking about being
Yes.
lonely, I've met 2-time cancer survivors since becoming one, but it's usually often of the same cancer. Very rarely do I meet people who are 2-time cancer survivors of 2
Right.
different cancers. So that makes it even lonely to be like, okay, oh, do I go to the thyroid cancer support group for this, or do I go to the kidney cancer support group for this? Who's
That's
gonna
not
understand
something I've
that?
thought about, and
Yeah,
that just wow, that really, I'm so sorry.
and it's okay. Like I find ways to deal with it, but I think it's something that, again, going back to the siloed, even when you're a 2-time cancer survivor of different cancers, you still end up falling into that trap of I have to go here or there because you don't really
Right.
have a place where it's both, right? Or
Right.
where it's
Right.
multiple places where there's this like one area for you. Like it's like, you want to just talk to someone, maybe not about what your particular cancer did to you or
Right.
what side effects you have related to your cancer, yet that particular cancer. Maybe you just want to talk to someone about, again, intimacy issues. Like, hey,
Mhm.
I'm feeling really ugly today. Like
Yeah.
I have this scar on me. I don't like looking at
Yeah.
it. Like I'm about to cry just even mentioning it. Like I don't like looking at the
Right.
scar on my neck.
I
I don't like
understand.
looking at the scars on my stomach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I got skin removal surgery, not only because I had the kidney cancer scars and the way it was sewn up, but because I did lose
Mhm.
over 120 pounds and I wanted to
You
tighten
were
that
ready
stuff
for it.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I still didn't like looking at my stomach. I still don't like looking at this. I still
Yeah.
find ways to hide my body when I do get intimate with Sam. He might not realize it, because he's into it, but I know I'm conscious of certain parts of my body where
Me
I'm like,
too. I am too.
I want to hide it, or like, can I cover this, or you know?
I was prior to my cancer diagnosis, I was a very extroverted person. Let's just say that. So I was not ashamed of my body. I was a ballerina. I was a dancer. Um, Not that type of dancer, guys. But let me just
No
say,
shame if you were. No shame.
there's no
if you
shame in
were.
anything.
No
I'm not
shame.
shaming anybody. But my whole point is, I was never afraid. And I think that the human body is a beautiful thing. My mom is an artist. My brother is an artist. And so naked portraits are something that I have all over my house. And so for me to go from being that open and then, you know, having so many surgeries and my stomach, something that always was always told, oh, you don't have any stretch marks. You don't have any stretch marks. Well, it doesn't matter if I have stretch marks. I have railroad tracks now. And that's okay. They're my battle scars, you know, but I do get very, very, very self-conscious. I don't think I would even wear a bikini, you know, and I live on the water. I live on the water and I haven't showed my stomach to anyone, to anyone. So I can feel you on that 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when I was, 30 pounds lighter, when I was first, at my first diagnosis and I was first starting my bodybuilding journey, I did wear just my sports bra, but very rarely did I do that.
Yeah.
Like I did it for one photo shoot because it was like, okay, it's close to a year later. I want to market like this is my
Right.
first bodybuilding show that I'm going to be doing that year,
We are
whatever.
so hard on ourselves.
But
We
other
really are,
than
because I think
that, it
you're
was,
gorgeous.
thank you. And you're gorgeous
I
too. But I think,
do. I
but
mean,
to
you
your
give me
point,
so much inspiration and hope.
aw,
Like when I saw you on stage performing and you
aw,
were representing the kidney cancer community in your outfit, that brought tears to me and a lot of people. And we've
aw,
really appreciated that. You represented us. And I thought you were the most gorgeous woman I've ever seen. So it's
aw.
so funny. I think we tend to be really hard on ourselves unfairly. We
Oh, for
do,
sure. We're our worst,
right?
like our own worst critic, for sure. But
We
like to
are.
your point, even
Yeah.
though I did it that one time, I still made sure I had like a tank top on. Like I still, and to this like
Yeah.
day, it's like if I don't wear short shorts and a crop top, it's like if I wear short shorts, I'm wearing a pump cover. If I'm wearing leggings, maybe my crop top comes like to like here. It's not usually really
Yeah.
short. Like there's still that like that shame I feel. And I think that's something and this is, this is obviously a podcast particularly for kidney cancer survivors, but I want a lot of survivors to take, if maybe they stumble on it and they're not a kidney cancer survivor, I want you to take something away. But I think that's something that we don't talk about within our community is like our physical perceptions of ourselves after the
Yes.
surgery. Like there's such this focus on, well, be happy that you're still alive and you only have to take out your kidney, that
Right.
it's like, it's supposed to be that is one and done. Right. Like that's kind
Right.
of what we get put into, and that's we internalize,
That is
right?
very true.
We end up
That is so
internalizing
true.
it.
That is true. We're just told to get kind of like, yeah, that's so interesting that you brought that up. And I'm glad you did actually, because that is very true.
But I always feel like this tinge of worry whenever I mention things like this, because I don't
Yeah.
want people to think that I have any bitterness towards people who carry that kind of viewpoint of like, well, it
Yeah.
is one and done, I should be grateful. But I think that when we internalize those messages and like perpetuate those messages, we don't leave space for people who are having a harder time, because
Correct.
statistics show, and again, this, I talk about this in another episode with our guest, but statistics show that at least like 75-80%, something like that, of cancer survivors do experience cancer related anxiety, depression, and
Yes.
loneliness. And then when you see only 5 actually get help, and knowing that both community based and larger hospital systems don't have the mental health resources, saying
Right.
having this message of, well, I'm so happy to be alive, without acknowledging
Yeah.
that there's another side to that also needs to be given voice and comforted. It makes it harder for us to heal. And being honest about these things, it doesn't say
Yes.
that being grateful or having gratitude is a bad thing, and
Correct.
that we shouldn't focus on that, but
And
that
for
the
the
whole
earlier
person.
Correct. And especially for those that are diagnosed with earlier stage, even all the way through stage 3, that aren't in palliative or hospice care, we don't get the support. At least I wasn't offered any type of therapy. I mean, I was told on a chalkboard that I had cancer. And it's just kind of been like, where my facilities that I'm in are absolutely amazing and they're compassionate. My facilities that I'm at currently, I'm referencing when I first started my journey almost 3 years ago. Yeah, the way it was delivered was like kind of harsh. And then
Yeah.
that was it. I was left to go on my own and figure it out. And nobody even mentioned therapy or
Nope.
joining a group or, finding a girlfriend or a partner that you trusted, and that was safe for you to talk to.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So that was hard. That was hard, and that was a learning process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same, like it's the same for me. A lot of it was just me doing my own research, me trying to find people,
Yes,
and I
me
still to
too.
this day do my own research because I don't necessarily have a place to turn other than you ladies and
I was
other
gonna say
people
my
I know.
research is sending it to you ladies
Yeah.
and saying, "What do you guys think? What should I
Yeah. But like,
do?"
but I think the thing is like they're, as much as we love each other and we're so close, as
Yes,
much as I love my other survivor friends who I talk through
yes,
Instagram, there's but so much support we can give each other because we're not
yes.
doctors, right? Like,
Correct, correct.
let me rephrase. There are some of us who are doctors. There are some of us who are therapists,
That's correct too. Oops.
but in our
Yes,
group,
I know what
that's
you
not the
mean.
case, right? Like I might have
Right.
more experience with mental health advocacy because of my background as a journalist. So I might have
Yes.
a little more insight. But even still, it wouldn't be necessarily fair to me to like rely on you to give me an objective point of view when you're going through a
Right,
similar experience. So
right.
having more resources in our community centers and in our large hospital systems and at our doctors is an important way for us to be able to heal, so we're not having these conversations on a podcast, right?
Yes,
Or rather
yes.
that we're not breaking the mold and having conversations that are like that we have in whispers or in shadows.
Well, for an example, also talking about mental health, I did not know for a very long time that I could even request medication to help me through scans because the level of anxiety when you go through a tube, such as a closed arm MRI, is astronomical, especially for somebody who deals with anxiety issues, right?
Yeah.
I've never been claustrophobic. I grew up on the water. I boat every day I can since I was a little girl. So I've been in very closed environments and it's never bothered me until I was diagnosed with cancer and I had my first closed MRI. That shocked me. I had a panic attack. I've never had panic attacks in my life. I didn't even recognize it as a panic attack. No
Yeah.
one prepped me or warned me. So it was very sobering experience having to navigate through that on my own.
Yeah, and I think that that goes to another point about the collective cancer experience. So even though I don't particularly have an anxiety around MRIs, I do have anxiety around a same
Okay.
technician doing my scans. So I don't know if I told you late. I think I did, but I have to, at the end of November, I have to go for a whole body scan because my levels are still
Okay.
detectable. My thyroglobin levels are still detectable. And so we
Okay.
need to rule out that there's not cancer in my body. So I don't know if I'm actually cancer free, but I'm going to the same location I go to every time that I've gone since
Okay.
I've had my first diagnosis. And there's always this anxiety in me that I will get the same person because he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do
Right.
anything wrong at all. But my body, my brain associates him with cancer. Like he was the one who did my
That
scan
I
for my
understand. I
thyroid.
understand.
And like the minute
Wow.
I saw him, I'm like, yep, it's cancer. Like the universe is sending me
Yeah.
a message. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be cancer, right? Not to
Right.
say I get, you believe in the universe or not.
I understand. I get that way when I go to my local ER. I'm at the tail end of pneumonia. I was battling pneumonia and hospitalized, I think 2 weeks ago. We had to actually reschedule this podcast because of it. And so when my husband Adam had to call 911 because I couldn't breathe, um, all of a sudden it was like back there, right back to the first day I was diagnosed. And when we pulled into the ER, I was like having a panic attack. And the fire department was like, ma'am, you just had to calm down, calm down. I'm like, no, but you don't understand. I have cancer. Like, that was the first thing that came out of my mind, because not that I wasn't able to breathe. Well,
Yeah.
I was able to breathe. I was having shortness of breath
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pain in my chest. So they weren't sure what was going on. And my mind, not having a heart attack, my mind went to having cancer, which
Yeah.
is, it shocked me again. But yeah, the
But
trauma again is very real.
yeah, it's very real and sometimes doesn't come out until you have those triggering moments. And again, it's something
Mhm.
that I think when we talk about cancer, we don't talk often enough about, is just all those triggering moments from being told you have cancer. Because on it, like I said, I always worry about, is he going to be the one? And like if I see him, it's just the anxiety is through the roof. And it shouldn't be.
I know.
But it just is. When I went to MD Anderson for a second opinion, I mean, at that point, I already had my thyroidectomy. There's nothing else they could do other than give me like radioactive iodine. But
Yeah.
I like just sitting there, like tapping my foot almost
I
in
know.
tears. Sam
I
couldn't
I
come
get
with
the
me.
same way. I get so nervous. I am
Yeah.
anytime I go to a doctor's appointment, it doesn't even matter what it's for. I was getting my glasses, I was getting my eyes checked, getting new glasses, and I'm, checking for glaucoma. And I was like, hey, did you know I have a history of cancer, and I'm stable, but I don't know that I'm cancer free. I've got, I'm telling him my story, and just being in that environment, in that setting, it just sparked something within me.
I'm glad we had this conversation because I just think it's really important to like for us to, as we move forward in our advocacy, to like start centering the collective experience. I know I keep using that phrase, but that really
Yes.
is what it is. It's like, we have this experience, like this experience that unites us. It's just the tactical parts of it, the logistical parts of it, right? The
Right.
facts of it may be different, right? Like
Right.
you were stage 3, I believe. I was stage 1.
Correct.
Like, but even though those are different stages, we still have that trauma that we understand. We still have the fact that we both went through it during COVID and we couldn't be near our families, or,
Right.
Sam didn't come with me when I did my MRI, or
Yeah.
they wouldn't let him in. It had a big sign.
They
Only one
wouldn't let
person
Adam in
wouldn't let.
as well during
Yeah.
my surgery. So not only did I go through COVID alone, I also went through my kidney cancer, my full nephrectomy totally alone. He wasn't allowed to visit me at all.
Yeah.
So I understand that.
Luckily Sam was able to come visit me and like he came with me.
Oh,
Luckily I
good.
had that, but that's all I had,
Good.
right? Like
Yeah.
no one could fly down to see me or anything like that. But I think my whole
Yeah.
point is like from that to like the intimacy issues to
Right.
our love-hate relationship with our bowels and other, female parts and just reproductive parts.
That's the
We all,
collective.
yeah, that's the collective. And I hope
Yeah.
that anyone listening, reach out to us, reach out to other people, and,
Yes.
start the conversations.
I think that my takeaway is, no matter what subtype you are, no matter what stage you have been diagnosed, whether you have uh, a great support system in a partner, I would say that the collective experience that we were talking about, during the whole last hour, is really important, because these are things, even with a supportive partner, I can't really, I wasn't able to openly talk about.
Yeah.
So finding your person, and that was you, and we had never even met. So you're not my
Yes.
sister. We weren't related. Is
Girl.
that this podcast is really amazing, because I have not seen anything like it. And I appreciate it because it can connect everybody collectively in ways that you might not have thought about, right? Dealing with a journey.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you, and I thank you. And I feel like you're my sister, and we've never
Yes.
met.
Yeah.
But and I also appreciate the Kidney Cancer Association for putting on this podcast as well.
Oh,
So thank you.
Well, no, thank you. And I think of you as a sister too. And trauma bonds you. Like there's enough research to
does.
show that trauma bonding is a thing. But I'm glad I was able to bond with you. Just again, we, even if we have different leanings, different outlooks, we still
Yeah.
have an experience we could bond over. And it's about like
Exactly.
censoring the survivorship experience.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kidney Cancer Unfiltered, brought to you by the Kidney Cancer Association. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to get episodes weekly. And if you liked the show, we'd love it if you left a review. It really helps others find us. Thanks again for listening. For more information about kidney cancer, visit the Kidney Cancer Association online at kidneycancer.org.